My name is Gary Dykstra. I come from the United States. I have been here in Bali for the last 5 years. Well, it'll be 5 years in February. And together with a community of people here, we attempted to create a Bitcoin economy where local merchants accepted Bitcoin as payment. I arrived in Ubud in February of 2014, and I don't know anybody. I came for a little economics conference, and so I met some people in the conference, but I really didn't know anybody. But I have this idea to at least connect with people that are interested in this topic, and so I'm beginning with a weekly meetup. I put some posters up. I talk to people. I tell them what I'm interested in. And we have our first meetup and nobody shows up. Zero, goose egg. No people arrive at the meetup. So, but I was undaunted, put up a few more posters, talked to a few more people, and the second meetup we had like 4 or 5 people. And from then on, we constantly had a few people showing up every week, and this is in 2014. And we had just had the blow off top of the end of 2013, and so a lot of people were curious, like, what is this Bitcoin thing? So we're meeting every week, and more people are coming. We're having more and more conversations, and the time becomes more ripe where we can begin approaching businesses, and or at least taking in the businesses that show up at the meetings, because there are business owners that show up. They're curious about Bitcoin, and we're starting to have conversations with local businesses. For example, a local jewelry store shows up, and there's this woman that has stores in Costa Rica and California and here in Bali as well, and she's kind of plugged into the whole global monetary, the problems that exist with the global monetary system. She's like, I would like to take Bitcoin. And so we set her all up. We created some software that allowed businesses to accept Bitcoin as payment, and nobody bought any jewelry for Bitcoin. She had a little sticker in her shop window, and nobody shows up. Nobody has Bitcoin on their phone, and they're like, I want a piece of jewelry for Bitcoin. That does not happen. Fortunately, we sign up businesses like restaurants, and this ended up being the best use case, because the people that were coming to the meetings could patronize the restaurants. Everybody eats every day. It's a small purchase. And so what we find is that restaurants are the best use case for geographic adoption of Bitcoin as a currency. And actually we start signing up restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, and then we get a new restaurant, and then we have the community patronize that restaurant, or we have our next meeting at that restaurant, and then the owner of the restaurant gets that income. The staff get to learn, what if somebody shows up and asks to pay with Bitcoin, and because it's a restaurant, we can go, a couple times a week, and if there are people in the community that are agreeing to do that, then you get some momentum. We do the regular internet marketing. We get on CoinMap, and we're on Reddit and promoting things in this way. And there are, at this point in time, people are showing up in Bali and saying, where's the meetup? And so they come join the meetup, and then they become patrons while they're visiting us here. And I think we developed a bit of a reputation. There was also promotion from the local Bitcoin exchange, bitcoin.co.id. They were supporting us as well, and people are showing up. Teams of people, like Bitcoin companies, are showing up and working for a month at the local co-working space, and then supporting the local economy while they're here. What we were advocating at the time was spend your Bitcoin and then buy more Bitcoin and then spend it and buy it and spend it so that it will begin to circulate. And that's what people made a philosophical choice to do if they were involved in this movement or trying to make these things happen. They had a philosophical ideology that motivated them to take that action. But what we found, and also the business owners had an ideological compulsion to get involved and use it. But that use case really wasn't interesting for the typical consumer or the typical merchant. You know, if you really didn't care about the philosophy or you didn't want to go through the trouble as a user, you didn't bother. And then as a merchant, you know, you've got, you know, there's a lot of reasons that make it more trouble than it's worth. So I think those problems will go away when Bitcoin is more ubiquitous. And so I've come to the opinion that it really needs to be a store of value, which doesn't have the volatility that it has today, so that it can be more interesting for both users and merchants as a medium of exchange. But I didn't used to have this opinion, but I do now, that it needs to be perceived as a store of value before it can move to that other realm of being a medium of exchange. I would love to see if market mechanisms can fill the role that has traditionally been provided by government. Governments provide regulations, the rules of the game, and then we all play by the rules of the game. And that has worked for a long time, but there are many inefficiencies in that model. Government can get it wrong, and people's lives can be severely negatively impacted by the missteps of government. You mentioned the taxi use case. If you go and look in New York City with the medallion system that they use then, you know, that it's obvious in retrospect that the resources that they were trying to allocate, as in, you know, drivers, taxis, and taxi rides, was totally misshapen by the government intervention. And once Uber showed up, there were nicer cars for less money. And even the hardworking drivers could probably make more. So it's obviously better. But, you know, we had one of the founders of Airbnb came through Bali and gave a little talk. And that's also another example of one that you mentioned. And he told the story about how they were matching travelers and apartment owners, and it was going really great. And then some bad actor rented someone's apartment and trashed it and disappeared, and it made the news, and it was a huge problem. It was an existential problem, is the way he described it at the time, because people didn't know, you know, yeah, I want to rent out my apartment, but I don't want it to get trashed, or you know, I want to use somebody's apartment, but, well, you know, who's going to show up in the middle of the night? You know, you've got this trust problem. This is traditionally offloaded to government. Government, you know, makes the rules that keep those things safe in the past. I'd love to see if now we can have self-service reputation systems, self-service money, and a little bit more self-reliance and lack of reliance on government, because I think things can obviously be better. Resources can more appropriately be allocated by market mechanisms as much as possible. One of the aspects of money that makes money good money is fungibility, or the ability to, you know, I take $1 out of my pocket and you don't have to, you know, see if this dollar is better than the next dollar or another dollar, because that creates friction. You want to simply be able to accept a piece of money that I hand you. And the nature of Bitcoin, because it's not anonymous, and we've already seen this beginning to happen, there are blacklists. So, you know, if somebody can say, if your money was used to buy drugs on the Silk Road, for example, you can't accept, you know, you can't use that money here. or you know, this person is on a sanctions list in China, so you know, don't expect to be following Chinese regulations if you accept money from, you know, some Falun Gong guy. That also goes for the United States, by the way. When the United States says, you know, this, you know, Russian man is under sanctions in the U.S., you better not be selling him anything for Bitcoin. Or, you know, here are the addresses we know are associated with him. You've got to make sure before you accept any payment from anybody that it hasn't passed through their hands. This harms the utility of money. And so I don't really believe in KYC AML. I think money should flow freely and we should catch criminals doing criminal acts. And there's too much utility in making money free for the rest of us, 99.9% of the people that follow the rules. You don't need to surveil everybody, you know, stamp everybody. You know, I liken it to a bunch of cows getting their ear tagged. I think I'm going to lose this battle because it doesn't seem like the world really cares that all these mechanisms are coming into place. But it harms the dream of what Bitcoin could be, that all this stuff is entering that world. The Bank of Indonesia released some statements that say, you know, you must use the Indonesian rupiah while you're in Indonesia. And it was a bit of a general statement, but I think the local Bitcoin exchange is also plugged into the political system, and they're getting phone calls saying, hey, you know, this is not correct. It's hitting the government's radar through things like somebody sold a villa for Bitcoin in Bali. And there's an article in the New York Times, there's an article in Forbes there about these things happening. And it's a bit of being a victim of your own success. I think it must have hit somebody's radar, or it must be hitting somebody's radar that we're doing something that maybe they just don't understand. So once we realized that the government was, or once we realized that the government is not so happy about these things taking place, we shut the whole operation down. Perhaps they were nipping us in the bud, but given the history of Indonesia and the history of the Asian contagion that happened in the late 90s, and the balance of trade problems that occur due to the trade wars that you know, China and the U.S. and such countries engage in, that have collateral damage to places like Indonesia, they're very sensitive to these problems. I would hope if an alien showed up and enlightened the central bankers of Indonesia, that they could take a laissez-faire attitude towards it at first. You know, if they were really enlightened, and this is an exciting prospect if you think about it. Again, unlikely, but really exciting. You know, a central bank could say, okay, we're going to accept tax payments in Bitcoin or in a cryptocurrency that's totally traceable when it comes to government. And so we're going to allow you to pay your taxes in Bitcoin, and then we're going to show you exactly how that money made its way through the channels of government. You know, you actually paid for this toilet seat on this aircraft carrier, or you actually paid for this teacher's salary. And, you know, this technology makes that possible, makes government accountability possible. And that's a whole new level of enlightenment when it comes to government. Like, forget about clamping down on people who are using it. Why don't you use it to be more transparent to your electorate, allow them to make more choices, let them see what's going on. You know, if we're going to shoot for the moon and totally get what we want, that would be amazing. And you could actually envision some form of direct democracy, because I really, being a U.S. citizen, I feel guilty paying taxes, knowing that we are involved in wars that I have no, as a citizen, I have no way to keep us from doing these things abroad. And I have this sense of guilt when I'm paying into a system where, when the headlines show that we're torturing people, for example, I'm like, ugh, like my personal productivity as a human being is contributing to that machine. If I could, I'd love to pay my taxes. I mean, I'm a fair person. I would like to do my fair share. But how amazing would it be if I could say, I'm going to pay my taxes, but you can't use it for war, or you can't use it for this purpose. But if you really needed it for defense, like let's say that there was a real threat, then people would give the money for that. The government would just have to make a better case. But it'd be nice if we had that check on the military power of our governments, where I think we'd be we'd be much friendlier with one another, because you'd have to convince more people to be militant. There was that quote, I want to say it was Naval Ravikant said, Bitcoin it's a save humanity system dressed up like a get rich quick scheme. Something along those lines. I'm kind of murdering it, but that's the idea, that people can get involved and realize the short-term benefits, and in the end, humanity will reap the true benefits, which are amazing and good for everybody. Bitcoin marches on, and even though Indonesia has their regulations, there are still people that learn about Bitcoin every day. The Indonesian Bitcoin exchange is still allows people to buy and sell Bitcoin. Excited for humanity that they have this thing at their disposal. We've never had anything like Bitcoin in the past. It's really humanity's way of counting all of our relative needs and wants, and it's got the potential to do that better than anything we've ever seen before. And once society has this and is using it, I'm just excited to see what will happen, what benefits will arrive for everybody on planet Earth, for humanity itself.